So, okay, so Craig, how is it in beautiful Michigan? You didn't hear me.
Can't hear you.
Oh,
Barely hear you.
Have to speak in your mic, maybe.
oh, I gotta turn my mic on then too.
Oh, no,
Oh, this mic. Oh, Craig, how is Michigan?
Can't. What was that?
Oh,
I can hear Patrick really well. I can't.
oh, I think,
I think I bumped the mic.
Can't hear Steve very well.
should be able to hear Steve now really well. That was my bad.
So I'll say something and test that.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, how
Got
is
it.
Michigan?
It's okay. It's summertime down here. Yeah,
When you say down here, where in
Yeah.
Michigan are you?
Grand Rapids.
Oh, sure. Home of
Yep.
a lot of Dutch Reform folks. Okay,
Home of,
uh,
home of Amway.
call the meeting to order. It is about 4:50 or a little before. And we have present everybody except Matthew, who is somewhere else. And we have an agenda that's been distributed. Does anybody want to change the agenda? I asked that we cover the shoreline project when he makes his report. So we won't have a separate item on the agenda for that, and he's already covered the bathhouse and rec hall in the report. If there's no objection, the agenda will be approved as distributed. Second thing is the minutes from our April 1st meeting. Does anybody have any additions or corrections?
Nope.
Hearing none, the minutes are approved as distributed. Next thing is the Sawtooth Bluffs report from the County Parks and Trails Commission, and I suspect you're Mitch Travis.
That is me. Yes.
Yeah. Are we gonna get a picture of Mitch?
Yeah. Well, for the stream, we'll have one. You'll have to use your own eye.
Live and in person.
Something's happening on my screen, but I'm not doing it.
He's getting an ad.
See? There you go.
Now, how do we? We have to turn his camera on, right?
No, he's, you'll just have to look at him.
He's in a deep shadow.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
But, on the live stream, we'll see him.
Need a spotlight.
Up close.
Oh, I see, there you are, okay. Excellent, thank you. Well, what would you like to tell us about the Sawtooth Bluffs report?
Yeah. Well, first, just introduce myself. My name's Mitch Travis. I've lived in Cook County almost 20 years now. So I'm not super familiar with everybody in Grand Marais, but I'm glad to be here today.
In that case, we'll introduce ourselves.
Yeah, that'd be
My
wonderful.
name is Steve Aldrich, I'm the chair of this volunteer group, I've been here 8+ years.
My name's Kay Costello, and I've lived in Grand Marais pretty much since 1984.
Okay.
Bob Nessheim, live up the hill.
Yeah. Hey, Bob.
And used to run
Used to run a B&B until COVID cleaned us up.
Gotcha.
across the way is Paul Jones, who runs the golf course for us. Behind you is somebody I don't know, who perhaps will be introducing himself.
Sure.
And you know Dave Trustique
Dave.
and Patrick Knight.
Yes.
And on the board there is Craig Schulte from the city
Yep.
council, who is their representative to this board.
Yep.
So what would you like to tell us?
Appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah. So you know what? I recently took up this position working with Cook County Parks and Trails Commission as their Parks and Trails coordinator. So I do that half-time on top of also doing other regulatory things, you know, between stormwater and wetland regulation. So, you know, part of the task that the Parks and Trails Commission has given me is just to kind of, you know, get a gauge as to where the community's at with the Sawtooth Bluffs project. As you know, you may be aware this was something that kind of started back in about 2015, 2016, with the whole planning phase. I know there was planning prior to that as well, but really took it up in that kind of time frame. And by about 2018, I believe, forgive me if my dates are wrong, but we had the Sawtooth Bluffs project brought forth to the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission, and they deemed it as a viable candidate for a regional park. This is a combination of city and county property that, we have proceeded to make this plan with. And so just coming out of COVID, kind of what I wanted to do was just to gauge the interest in the community from this project that had kind of sat on the shelf for a few years. So yeah, looking at, I'm not sure, can they see my presentation, Patrick?
Once you start presenting, it'll be a
Okay. That's not working right. Okay. Did I log out of the meeting? No. Okay, there we go. Sorry.
no. And hop over to PowerPoint.
Okay, and there we go. Okay. Perfect. I'm an elder millennial, so it's hard
If
for
we
even
wanna
me
make that
sometimes.
piece bigger, Patrick, is there something we can do or you can do?
See,
Mitch, I was on one of the original, I think we called it a consensus group, and Bill Hansen facilitated it. and
Okay.
It was divisive back then.
Yeah.
And we were trying to work out,
that's the
Yeah,
best
I
thing
mean-
with
a
the
range,
captions.
so.
Yeah, I mean, I
when
think-
I looked
But
at
you can
this,
look up
it's
here,
just
too.
like, oh my gosh, just,
Yeah, I guess I'll be
Things-
interested to see what your opinions are, but yeah, it's still kind of, depending on who you talk to, it can be somewhat divisive still. So, part of maybe kind of local recent happenings that you might be aware of, so there is that kind of chunk up on the western side of the park that's kind of in a dashed red line. That's the John Sheaf property that's kind of been front page for myself and other county entities, just as to what's gonna happen with that. There's kind of that, to a degree, that's the access that was kind of granted to Mr. Sheaf through a local court ruling. This presentation has some kind of things that, are relevant to county discussions, not necessarily this discussion, so. And then that access route was kind of from, if you can see the parking area at the top up by the old Ski Hill Road, that's kind of where the access would start crossing to the parcel, again, in the dashed red line over there. So, again, things that are happening on the county property that we're somewhat interested in. And kind of part of the reason that I'm coming to you today is just to kind of discuss this process regarding the development of Sawtooth Bluffs and what it might take, just to kind of bring everyone in the room up to speed. So if you're looking at this flow chart that I created, it kind of shows the process for potentially developing this in two separate ways. The one in blue on the left side discusses developing it kind of more at a local level without not necessarily with county and city funds, but just as a project by project basis that local user groups might take on. So you can kind of see, we could choose a piece of the park to build, design and plan that piece, and then seek approval through city and county, because it's county property, but it's also in the city jurisdiction, so, city council would have to ultimately make decisions on how we would utilize that space, alongside the county. So, draft up an agreement for the use of that potential piece between city and county, and we could, apply for grant funding through IRRR, DNR, et cetera. We get those grants awarded and ultimately hire a contractor, go through the permitting process and break ground. And you can kind of see, if we do that way, then we're starting from square one with every piece. Whereas if we kind of work as a city and county to come towards a joint powers agreement with Marais, we would ultimately appoint this joint powers board. And there's a couple of routes from there, depending on how we want to do it. Our preferred method with the county Parks and Trails Commission would be to hire that landscape architect firm to kind of help us through that process of planning it ultimately. And then we can finalize a master plan with that landscape architect, very similar to how you guys did the rec park. And then, submit that application to Greater Minnesota, ultimately, hopefully achieve regional designation. And then, from there, it's kind of a quicker method of just choosing a park component that we had in the plan, applying for legacy dollars through Greater Minnesota, and then, using that money that's received through legislation to hire a contractor, put out requests for proposals to hire a contractor, and then break ground on pieces of the project. So just kind of relevant to the conversation, but I'll try to speed it up here. So ultimately, my survey we broke it down into 9 questions regarding the park's development and 5 questions regarding demographics. So one thing we wanted to know is just how fresh it was in people's minds. So we asked the question, before this survey, were you aware of the proposed Sawtooth Bluffs Regional Park? And you can see I kind of broke this up into 4 different demographics. And so the top one is going to be your full-time Cook County residents that are living here greater than 180 days a year. The second line is your part-time residents, less than 180 days a year, frequent visitors, and occasional visitors. So you can kind of see that, a lot of the local folks did know about it, but some folks who don't spend their entire year in the area were a little less informed. Yep. So just, I asked the question, how likely are you to visit or use this regional park if it's developed? I guess I should have said back at the last one that we did get almost 485 responses for this survey. So this is just kind of a breakdown of all those responses. So again, how likely are you to utilize the regional park if it's developed? And so blue and green are very likely and likely. You can see amongst the full-time Cook County residents, it's, over half, about 56%. And then it kind of goes up from there. 180 day, or part-time residents are gonna, almost 80% say they would, and then, again, just higher from there. We kind of wanted to try to quantify how important folks felt it was to develop this regional park in Cook County. So we just kind of asked the question, how important do you think it is to develop a regional park in Cook County, and 0 being least important, 10 being most important. So, of the 400 some responses, you could see that pretty good contingent did not feel it was important. I kind of grouped those 0 through 3 on the low importance side. So you can kind of see between medium and high importance, it kind of comes out in the wash with a little bit of, a few more of the part-time and frequent visitors seeking more of those amenities. And feel free to stop me, ask questions. I know that I'm kind of rambling on. It's what happens when you give me a microphone. So, what amenities or features would you like to see in the regional park? And this was, people could select as many as they wanted. And it's just kind of a breakdown of, some folks wanted none of the above. Walking trails were typically the biggest desired amenity. The mountain bikers second in that, as well as ski trails. I can't see through my screen here, but you can kind of see. If you have any questions about what amenities we'd be looking for, feel free to ask. Ultimately, we'd work that out through the joint powers agreement process. Some other responses that we got as far as interested parties would be motorsports. A lot of folks kind of advocated for green or low impact activities, kind of things that are in harmony with nature. A lot of folks asked that we focus on housing and not this project. Some folks I didn't expect were kind of people looking for winter sports, whether it be glade skiing or sledding opportunities. Few folks in the climbing community were interested. Some folks mentioned having beginner mountain bike trail areas, as well as some picnic areas. And again, I just kind of wanted to try to capture as many voices as possible. These are some of the other amenities that were discussed. It's kind of like the option for other folks seeking the other column. And then next, following up, how much do you believe the development of a regional park would benefit the local community? You know, kind of that similar distribution as you got to that last question. You know, people seeing it a medium or high benefit, you know, or about even with folks seeing it as a low benefit, which with kind of folks that are not full-time residents seeking those amenities a little more. And then just kind of had some concerns about the regional park that I expected from folks. One thing I neglected to include was that, you know, no concerns having been an option, but I did get a lot of that. A lot of folks wanted to see the hillside left alone. A lot of folks felt that there was enough recreational opportunities for folks already. Some gripes that this park would be just for tourists. Folks concerned about safety on the Gunflint Trail or Old Ski Hill Road and just the amount of traffic there. Folks were concerned about it being a cost to taxpayers. You know, water quality and air quality from, you know, having a project on the hillside with storm water as well as campfires. Some folks were concerned if we have a campground there, you know, it might have air quality issues for folks with asthma. Again, focus on housing, and some folks were concerned about lack of staffing. Again, please stop me if you have any questions.
I think, Travis, that when you're all done, if you could send your presentation
Oh, yeah.
to Dave, and he could send it to the members of the board,
Sure.
so we can see it in a bigger.
Absolutely. Yep.
He did.
Yep.
I sent it last Friday.
I do have one question. And
Sure,
that is,
yeah.
what kind of time frame is the one with the legacy funding? Would it entail from when you start to finish?
If you once you reach that designation, there's not really a sunset on it as long as there's legacy dollars, to my understanding. You know, so as long as it's kind of achieving the goal of the park project that you know set out to accomplish, and even new ideas that you didn't anticipate, you can still, you know, make amendments to that plan and apply for funding. So as long as we have legacy dollars, it would be an opportunity for use if we can think of something we want to do there.
Am I correct that if the Joint Powers Board decided that it wanted to do a little project or some part of it on its own, they could do that and still not disqualify from the regional funding for some other part of it?
Absolutely, yeah, that is my understanding. Yeah, so I've actually spoken with Greater Minnesota about that question specifically. We could, you know, theoretically, if we wanted to, for example, come up with a disc golf course or the dog park like they already did, you know, those entities could take up that mantle of getting grant funding to do those projects if they desire.
Could
Any other
you,
questions before he continues?
could you show us the map again of the area that's in question? You had a map, a plat map of the section or whatever it was.
Is it this one or this one?
Yeah,
You're talking about this one?
well, yeah. How does the city have jurisdiction over that?
Yes.
Not all of it.
Not all of it, but a majority of it. Yep. Isn't it? No?
A third.
Okay.
County holds the majority ownership
So the county owns it?
Well,
over the hill. The city owns from like the hill down,
Yeah,
county owns the
Okay.
back side.
okay.
And
And where
then-
is the
but
private,
the city boundary he's asking about.
where's the private parcel that's not part of this yet?
To the left of that.
this
big-
one, yeah, the one in the hashed line here.
Okay.
There's 80 acres in there.
Yep.
And where is the bluff line and
It's
Well-
the exposure to the city from Sawtooth Bluff? Where does that
Yeah.
fall across this? across
Find
this-
the,
Yeah,
Is
that's
the
a
tower-
great question.
Where's the tower at?
Yeah, the tower's up here, Greg, at
Okay.
the little P on the top there.
Okay.
Which is county.
Yep.
So if
Sure.
I'm seeing where the little marker is, it's to the right center of the top, above the top of the big blue ball and to the left of the smaller blue
Right.
ball, okay?
Yeah.
It seems to me that the view shed from the city of the bluff line will be the predominant concern. You know, if you look up the hill and you see crap, that would be bad. If you look up the hill and it's green, that would be good.
So that there was a good contingent of folks that felt that way. Yes.
And you can do all kinds of stuff below that and nobody will notice. But just turning up the gunflint and looking up the
Yeah.
hill, if you take that away, it'll have a substantial tourism impact.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think, yeah, I mean, I could go on for a long time about tourism, but and two, I wanted to clarify that, this plan that we have here is nothing in any way set in stone, and that would really get guided through the Joint Powers Board process. Ultimately taking, things like survey feedback from your community, determining what the needs are for the community. In terms of we had some folks that were against having an RV park, for instance, where, they didn't want to see that on the hillside, so it's kind of something where we still get to steer the ship, as to what it ultimately becomes. I just
Yeah,
wanted to clarify
I
that.
don't know if you're familiar with the city of St. Paul, but had a chance to weigh in on development of the bluffs after the Mississippi turns to the east, acquires the Minnesota, and there's development on the lower south or upper side of that bluff, which has a huge impact on the view from Fort Snelling and downstream, and has caused a lot of kerfluffle down there based on who can build on the bluff line and what can they see and who can see them. And, what right does the public have to preserve the green space in the river corridor? And that's been going on for 20 years and is very acrimonious and I think well defended on both sides. And you could walk into that sort of well-intentionedly and end up just with a lot of blowback.
Yeah, well,
Once you cut them down, they're gone. And once you put boxes on the hillside, you got boxes on the hillside. And much as I love Daly City, California, we don't want to do that.
I completely understand and appreciate that, and that's kind of something I think, one, we're working as a county towards the acquisition piece of that parcel. Additionally, I do hear people saying that often in the comments, we want to keep it a green space. And I think the important thing to kind of recognize here is this land has no current, use. And so if a county board decided they wanted to sell it, they could. If a city wanted to sell one of your parcels, you could. And so just, even if it's just hiking trails or a conserved space, even that is a good thing, in my opinion. If preservation of the hillside is what the community is seeking, I think we could do this with a very minimal touch. And two, while it may look like a big blue sphere, some trails cut through the woods, say like in Pincushion, imagine Pincushion, you're not seeing that from the city, so if we just have hiking trails up there, that's gonna be a 3-foot wide path.
Right, if you stand on Artist Point and you look at Pincushion Trail System, it's hugely developed by several systems and totally invisible because of the way it's laid out in the trees. You can maybe see the parking lot on a clear day, and that's it.
Yeah.
So you have great development, multi-use, and total aesthetic preservation at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we're, sorry, this is all great stuff, guys, thank you.
Craig or Kate?
Anybody?
Questions or comments?
Nope.
Oh, and
Did you have something, Craig?
yeah, no, yeah, I
Do
agree
you
with
have
the,
any idea
a park is one thing, development with townhomes and houses is another, and I don't think we're talking about townhomes and houses and those kind of things. We're talking about, hiking trails, multi-use trails. At least that's what I think the, the plan is revealing to me anyway. And as far as the the amount of land that the city has. I know the city years ago there was a ski hill up there with a rope tow, and there used to be a chalet at the top of the hill, which you can see remnants of it. I'm sure in its day you could see all of it, but that was the only thing that was ever on that hill ever in the past as far as development.
Mitch, what was that development that was begun 20 years ago where somebody dynamited to the northwest along the Gunflint up the hill? Above the water tower,
Oh,
before the turn, there's,
that would have been a city guided issue. I believe it. Are we talking
Yeah.
about
Matt Girish.
yeah, Gerichlager?
Yeah,
Zip line.
Yeah.
he bought the
yeah,
land, and
it's been dynamited up the hill and then nothing ever happened.
Right.
And it's not clear what was supposed to happen. And whatever did happen, didn't happen, and it doesn't matter, except the rocks have been moved around.
Yeah. Well, it's just kind of, to me, if preservation is the goal, working towards this joint powers board so that we could ultimately kind of start steering that ship in that direction and make sure that we don't leave our, we don't, that we kind of button up that issue so it doesn't become an issue later on.
Yeah, is that city land?
Yep. I
Yeah.
mean, most of the stuff right along the,
Was. It's-
oh, excuse me.
it's sold.
Private, no.
And nothing.
private land now.
Yeah.
Was city land. It was sold. I don't know who owns it. Gerichlager still own it or not, Dave? I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
It
so
was for
just,
sale, I know.
just to set everyone at ease, there's no joint powers agreement yet between the county and the city. And really, that's the question on the table. I believe Mitch is planning on presenting to city council next week.
Yep.
The same show and the same discussion of county, city, are we gonna come together, form a joint powers agreement, and begin to plan this project? And this survey was, I think,
Yep.
a tool in weighing that decision,
Yeah.
because you've got mixed results, right?
Yes.
I'd say half the people want it, half the people don't, just like you experienced 30 years ago. Okay.
Am I correct that you would like to be the lead city staff person dealing with the issue? Because it's likely to be a park?
If and when it gets to that stage, yeah, we could lend our expertise.
Well, I think that's the kind of stuff too that we iron out in the joint powers agreement, who's responsible, how do we manage it, and, what kind of operational costs are we gonna have? Those are all things that remain to be seen because we have no clear target,
Can you throw us another plat map of who owns what? Without the development proposals on it?
Shouldn't, yeah.
I don't think you had one in your packet.
No, I don't, but I could get there, if you give me a minute.
Just be curious to see who owns what and how it impacts the ridge line and the road.
Right.
So how many joint powers agreements are there now between the city and the county? There's the library,
Law enforcement
law enforcement.
might just be the two.
The why?
Anything for the
Maybe a little
communities?
why.
Anything for the community center?
I don't, there's
I
not
don't think the city.
a board necessarily that governs
I
that.
just,
For sure, library and law.
yeah. And, how functional are they? Seems like it.
Pretty good.
So,
Well, we're trying to redo it. We're trying to redo the law enforcement one. We're still working on that.
Oh,
can they see my screen still?
Just a moment here.
Okay.
Now we should, oops, sorry.
Should I be plugged into that?
No, you can see your.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can kind of see the pink hued one here is the city property. The things in orange or yellow orange is county. And then we've got the sheaf parcel over here showing these 8 parcels there.
Oh,
Yeah, so I'm going the wrong direction. So you can kind of see this is kind of the all of the area dedicated.
Yeah, that's
For the
helpful,
park.
thank you.
Yep.
How
If
big
you had
is
some
the
if we had,
land area?
Oh, good.
if you had contour lines, if you had contour lines on a different map, you'd be able to see the elevation and you know,
Yeah,
what's actually usable land and what's not.
right. Most of it is, I think, you know, I've walked a lot of the hillside. We would have some, you know, like with access down here, there are some wet areas, because access would ultimately, the plan was to have access coming off of Fifth Avenue, kind of right across from the recycling center. At least that's my understanding. Maybe it was more, maybe it was different. But to access from this lower route here to get up to this, a lot of folks kind of expressed concern about utilizing the runaway truck ramp up by the tower. That would not be the case. We'd be creating access from Fifth Avenue here.
Bullet.
Again, we're kind of getting off in the weeds, but just to kind of help you guys
Yeah.
conceptualize. And yeah, I think, you know, to Dave's point, you know, that's kind of part of why I'm here is just, you know, to, you know, spark the conversation again, see where the city's at in terms of appetite about jumping into the joint powers agreement process.
Be interesting to throw up a video of the plat map as you have here with the terrain against it and then flip it in the machine so you could do a virtual what it would look like along those lines for future development.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I could try to discuss this with you. I mean, so I actually walked up here just last week to kind of the corner of the sheaf parcel here. If you're looking from up here, really what you can see is County Road 7. It's looking almost due south.
Right.
Whereas the kind of the further east you move, that kind of angle of the ridge changes and you're looking a little more towards town. I'm not sure you would see a lot of development on the sheaf parcel, to be honest, unless you were kind of driving on 7 past the hospital. But I mean, certainly, you know, over here we have our ability to control that controllable, and you know, we're working with Mr. Sheaf on the other end. So, any
You
questions?
mentioned,
Yeah.
well, first of all, how big is this property again, the whole thing?
Oh, good question. I want to say it's about 12. Am I close? So this,
Sweep is 80 acres, I think.
yeah. So the city portion is 140. We've got 1, 2, 3.
40 acres?
The city portion is 140 acres, and the county comprises another 2/3 of that. So another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's
Just under 400 acres, all of it maybe.
right.
And does that include the private property that's not yet owned
No,
by city
it
or
does not.
county?
No, that would be an additional 80 acres.
How big is that, is it
Eight-
parcel?
80, 240s here.
Okay,
So we're talking a square mile.
Mitch, can I ask why
Yeah.
the sheaf property suddenly becomes a distraction almost? Or a,
So yeah,
Why now?
to kind of that's a good question. So ultimately, the reason that this has kind of come to the forefront is, so Mr. Sheaf was working with his legal counsel to kind of generate this access that I discussed kind of at the beginning of the presentation. So ultimately, there was essentially a ruling that the county must observe this legal access here. So there was this old plat map from the 1900s that was
Yep.
overlaid on these areas judge ruled that Mr. Sheaf could utilize these streets and avenues to generate access to his property.
So that's an impediment to the future development.
Not necessarily, it's more just, it's brought it to the forefront because, you know, Mr. Sheaf is either one, he's going to build this road, or he wants the county to grant him, you know, another access that doesn't necessarily follow the streets and avenues, you know, for his interests in terms of, you know, getting market price for his property.
Does the Parks and Trails Commission feel like that we need to settle this before we can move forward?
No, I kind of think, you know, there's two independent conversations here. Is the, you know, the Sheaf parcel and what happens to that is kind of irrelevant, you know, ultimately.
That's good.
Where I mean, yes, it was kind of blocked off as this potential acquisition for the park, but doesn't necessarily need to happen for the park to happen. So regardless of what happens with that piece, Joint Powers Board could still proceed with plans as they are, or whatever iteration of that would become.
You
And that
mentioned
access-
a nation of obsidian property?
Sorry, what?
I thought, or my text on my screen said there was some property that had something to do with the nation of obsidian. There must have been some other words used that
This is a typo.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, typo. It must be the transcript or something, interpreting my words wrong. No, yeah, sorry. Where were we with that?
So the access, that pink, those roads don't exist, correct?
They do not exist.
No,
Yep.
it's an early plat that was found that gave him power in court to try to get access to that land. I think earlier he tried gaining access to that land off of the Fred Anderson Road that's up on the top of the hill. He was going to come down from above the hill, and that didn't work out. I think he bought this land in the 80s, maybe. I'm just trying to think. I think he bought it from Dietrich Realty because I remember walking this, looking at buying it with my dad. That's why I remember this a long time ago. So, but the problem at the time was how do you access it? That was the problem, you know.
Right.
It was a piece of land for sale, but you know, what do you do? What do you do with it after you buy it? But it's kind of interesting that we're looking at this again.
So it seems like so you're gonna go to the city council and then they're gonna wrestle with the decision to enter into a joint power. Has the county board agreed to do a joint powers?
Yeah, another kind of reason this is relevant is the county board decided ultimately to kind of give Cook County Parks and Trails $30,000 to dedicate towards the planning process of the park. You know, and I guess to try to simplify it as much as possible, you know, I think the county was kind of was interpreting that the city would like to kind of have the county oversee this process, you know, and part of that was hiring me into this position to have somebody dedicated to it. And then two, to kind of like, to put some money on the table about, to make it happen, you know, and so the county board has decided that, and so here I am today speaking to you.
Yeah, and I could agree with Mitch on these points where I presented to the Parks and Trails Commission last year. And sort of here's how we became regionally significant example of our process and what it cost and what it took and how long and the public engagement components. But I was really at that meeting also with the message of we would like the county to lead this because 2/3 of the land is county, because it would be used by the county, you know, residents as a whole and visitors and at the time, a year ago, the city's position was, you know, we'll be ready when the county is.
Yeah, and it seems like if the city council decides to move forward, then it would come back, you know, like we
The
would
county
maybe be
council,
involved
yeah.
in some kind of, but until then,
Well, and I
this
think.
is good information.
Right, and I think kind of, you know, our hope is that, you know, there were going to be members of the Cook County Parks and Trails Commission as well as city parks and,
Sure.
other commissioners.
Right.
So, people
Right.
that have a stake in the game.
Does the Parks and Trails Commission have any sense that we don't have enough trails of any kind? In my background, and my question is, I've walked around from the Pincushion Mountain up there a number of times, and there are bike trails, and there are ski trails, and there are walking trails, and they crisscross, and we see other people walking. I haven't seen any bikes yet, but who knows? My question is, how do we know how much of each kind of trail we want?
Well, again, I think we would steer that through the planning process of the Joint Powers Board is, kind of to interpret some of this data, see what we want to have, we've got bike trails just down the road at Pincushion. Do we want to have more bike trails here? Or do we want to have something else? These are all conversations that we need to have. Other things that we've discussed have been disc golf, campgrounds, climbing opportunities, so there's all kinds of things that we could do with it. On top of that, it's not only recreation that we could discuss, it could be more community-focused projects. Just as a for instance, Hartley Nature Center in Duluth is run by the city in Duluth, and they have received designation from the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission. They operate a daycare, outdoor education, have bikes for rent for folks. They have some all-terrain opportunities for folks in wheelchairs. Those sorts of things are all things that are supported by the Legacy Fund. So
Yeah, Hartley is a great place.
yeah, right.
I mean, we tried to buy property on Hartley
Sure.
and failed. But it's just a beautiful park right in the middle
Yep.
of a city with, I think Duluth has 19 square miles of green space, and Hartley still matters,
Right.
because it's right there.
Yeah. Well, and I think, the opportunities that it create, kind of things that I'm hearing from the survey is, okay, there's, too many tourists, they're concerned about traffic and congestion. Okay,
Go home, tourists.
yeah, well,
Go
those
home.
sorts of things are
Stay
kind
home.
of saying, well, maybe we could create a space for, to relieve some of that, to have events up there rather than in the heart of the city where, people are trying to get around. I've got ideas that are coming out my ears, but, if, that's is kind of where I can't get too far ahead of myself. I need to, try to get the,
At some point, and I don't need to have the answer today, but at some point, I'll be interested at least in the question of how much demand is there, or how much for how many facilities, how many miles of trails, how does one measure that demand and that sort of thing. It's not something I
yeah,
think
yeah.
it's fair to ask you to answer today, but at some point in the process, some
Yeah.
idea of how many trails of what kind that we need given our population and the summer people and all that stuff.
And that is kind of part of like the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails process too, through looking in that regional designation, they are kind of looking at what communities are we hoping to serve, what kind of economic impact would it have? But yeah, like you said, I can't answer those questions today, but it would come out in the process.
If you look at the activity in the state legislature, like now, about trail development in various directions, it's huge. And the opposition is huge. And the advocacy groups are aligned on all sides of it. I mean, this is front and center to how does Minnesota use northeast Minnesota and for whom? And it looks quiet, but it's not a quiet issue. It's a big, big deal in how you apportion your space.
I think the other thing too to think about is moving ahead in the future with the trails we already have. I think some of the problems that we do face is the use and sometimes overuse, and sometimes money is available to build all this stuff. But then when you go back to try to get monies to maintain them and repair and fix, that becomes the problem. So I think that's something that we need to try to convince the state or whatever. I mean, that, hey, we have things that we need to fix, things we need to maintain, whether it's snowmobile trails or bike trails or hiking trails or whatever they are, ski trails. We build them and there's money for that. but there's not always money to fix them and maintain them. You're always struggling to find that money. That's an important issue too.
You can always build a church, you can't always keep the lights on. If you wanna build a church, piece of cake, capital investment, keeping it running,
Yeah.
look around town.
Yep. I can, so this is funny that you bring this up. So I also sit on a Legacy Fund Advisory Commission for the Parks and Trails component of the Legacy Fund, and this conversation is exactly the one they're having now, is, you know, we've got these wonderful state parks, and, you know, they're running up against that issue of, we've got these buildings that are, you know, really in need of maintenance, but, you know, do we want to start dedicating more legacy dollars in maintenance rather than development? So they're having that conversation at the state level right now. But
There's 100 million in deferred maintenance in state parks
Yep.
right this second. And I'm on a couple of trail boards that would love to build more trail, but
right,
it's a balance. It's a real balance.
right, right.
Well, we have some more items on our agenda. Are people comfortable with what we've done today, including you, Mitch?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just kind of wanted to address some of the concerns real quick. You know, just in question 6 specifically, like where we got a lot of other concerns is like, you know, folks are saying there's enough of this already. You know, they're concerned about cost and overtaxing locals. I just wanted to make it clear that if we do engage in this joint powers board process, you know, and we do achieve regional designation, well, you guys already know, I mean, this comes from state dollars. So this isn't something where I'm hoping to, you know, raise our levy to make this happen. This is something where, hey, let's work together to utilize this opportunity and make it what the community wants. You know, I'm not looking to change the hillside. I just want to preserve it as much as everybody else. So,
But if you don't move now to address this, somebody will build boxes on your hillside and everybody will be mad, except the 10 people that occupy the boxes.
right.
So you have a chance to preempt a conflict.
Yes, yes, yep. And it's just a good opportunity to collaborate, so.
Mitch, quick question.
Yes.
With the propensity of sort of the leave it alone, no, I don't support this, you know, answers, which is kind of what I gleaned, there was a pretty good, I would say majority, or a majority,
Right.
or even, it's,
Yeah,
did that surprise you? Did it change, has it changed the Parks and Trails Commission's attitude towards this?
no, I don't think so. In that, I feel like the folks, I mean, this is my opinion, my interpretation, you know, so put that right at the forefront. But I think the folks that see it as a low benefit are the folks who are concerned about it being a scar on the hillside, an extreme cost to taxpayers, only dedicated towards tourism. Like, those are the big 3. And I think the important thing to recognize is, you know, we're going to have the state or IRRR or something, you know, yes, those are all appropriated funds, but I think, you know, if it's legacy funding, it's coming from lottery dollars. And so there's that piece. Additionally, you know, we can make it a low impact thing. It doesn't need to be a big scar on the hillside. We can do it in a responsible way. And then, let's see, what was the third thing? I forgot. Yeah, cost, aesthetic.
That's all right. I
Yeah,
think I know
but-
where you're at. Like,
yeah.
we can address these concerns.
Yes, yeah, and, you know, and talk to the community about it and, you know, rely on the democratic process to make it happen in a way. Oh, yeah, that was the other thing. Like, instead of having it tourism focused, you know, we could do something that was community focused, like collaborating with higher education, or, you know, creating event spaces that the city and the county can utilize for things that reduce congestion within the city of Grand Marais. Those are the things that that don't dissuade me from it. It's something that we can speak to those people about this piece and how it could ultimately be a benefit and relieve some of that pressure.
Yeah, I agree that part of this, the end result could be the protection of it, you know, where it's because it's now this, you know, designated significant park, low impact hiking, dispersed camping maybe, you know, backpack style, tent camping maybe, because there was that component of it should or could generate some revenue, but not through intensive development, high density development, that this would be a way to protect it.
Right, right.
Yeah, pincushion, I think, is looked at becoming regionally significant, but it's, I think, not initiated that process. But that's a piece of this, that's a good example of how something might be done, which is regionally important.
And right across the street, so
Yeah,
complementary.
exactly. And remember that most of the money that runs this town comes from tourists.
I think that it's a good important piece, like, we
It's an
hitched our,
important piece.
we hitched our horse to that wagon a long time ago, you know, and so it's, to discount that fact is kind of like, well, you know, let's make a space for people to enjoy, whether you're from here or not, so,
Yeah, yeah. As a veteran of the tourist business, it's important.
absolutely. That's green, like, from a planning perspective, creating that green space and is an important aspect to people's health too, so.
Do you have anything else you wanna share with us, Mitch?
I can leave it at that, so.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you very
Yeah.
much for coming. We'll
Thank you.
look forward to getting the material that
Yep.
you had there over to Dave.
Yep.
I'm interested, by the way, in knowing what the ground is like underneath. So much of this place, that, you know, there's rock
Yeah.
2 inches below the surface.
Mo-
I'm curious to know what
Most of it would be
the land
that,
is
yeah.
like.
You're gonna experience that kind.
Wetlands and bedrock.
Yeah, right, exactly. There's a lot of that. I mean, not so much wetlands, cause you're on that hillside. There are wetlands on the backside with the pattern fen, but, we don't really get into that with where majority of the park is situated, so.
Superior Hiking Trail runs right along the ridge line, and the ATV trail runs right along the ridge line. And those are both very popular trails. But you take a step to your left and you roll down the hill.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah,
Good luck with
thank you.
council.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
But the reason I was interested in what the ground was like underneath was how much of a threat is housing up there really? Or anything else, you know, if
Well-
the ground is, you know,
On the
you gotta
ridge,
deal with sewage and water and things like that, if you're gonna have any development up there, and it may be totally impossible anyway.
on the ridge, I think you can do whatever you want, but you step over the ridge, it's a big swamp again.
Okay,
Been there, walked through that.
all right. Well, thank you. Paul, I believe you're up.
Could I just pause for a moment and introduce Pete Kavanaugh, who's been more than patient, and are you in any kind of rush, Pete?
I have to do the.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Stay by there.
Yeah.
We can take
So
that out
I
of
can-
order.
I can come back, you'll be.
No.
Nope.
Should I shoot-
Let's
Paul,
go
you
to
mind?
Let's
Pete.
take it out of order, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
don't think
Yeah,
it'll
Pete,
take
come
too
on up.
long.
I always take
Come on up.
a special treatment, just take a few minutes.
Yeah, so Pete, Lions Club
This was really
president.
informative though, and fun to
Yeah.
listen to, I mean, you guys do a really good job. I was really, learned a lot by just listening to how you guys work, it's really, really neat. So I'm with the Grand Marais Lions, I'm the president of the Lions Club, and, as you know, we're preparing to do the Fisherman's Picnic. Over the years, we've, seen the, food truck business start to increase as the Fisherman's Picnic vendor category starts to grow. It's a big part of our fundraising apparatus. As you know, this is our biggest fundraiser of the year, and everything that we raise from the Fisherman's Picnic goes back to the community. And so, and what we've encountered, and I've been with Alliance since 2015, and help with the Fisherman's Picnic every year. I'm very involved, especially with the music and setting up the sound and everything with the live music down there. Last year, I became more involved with problem solving and getting complaints, as it was my first year as the president. And we have always had electrical problems in the harbor. And what that means is we'll pop breakers because of electric draw, especially on Saturday when the Doucette's inflatables are there, and when they're all the food trucks are in their peak production and using, really drawing on current. Last year, it was even worse, because we had that very hot day, as you'll recall, on the Friday. It was excessively hot, and we actually had a complete power outage of the whole circuit. All the circuits and everything went down because the main breaker box. It is a 200 amp service that was installed back when it was first built, I think back in 2006. I think David Sather and Nordic Electric installed it. And we've essentially outgrown it. There's just more power requirements. I'm not an expert in food trucks or the food truck business. You know, this Lions is a volunteer organization. I don't claim to be an expert in power. I wish my vendor coordinator, Kenny Albrecht, was here and he could talk more directly about it because he's heavily involved in that sort of industry. But what we went down and evaluated the power based on the connection requirements of the vendors. And David Sather was with us as we went through, and Kenny advised on the different additions that we wanted to make to the power. And David Sather came back with an estimate. Some of the work that we that we proposed would require trenching to come back across the harbor to increase the cabling capacity to because of the increase to the main service. We would go from a 200 amp to a 600 amp service in order to accommodate all the power needs. And this would expand to add 4 additional 50 amp circuits for the food trucks for us to be able to handle their capacity and the power of the other vendors that draw the power as well. So we put the proposal together, and I didn't actually see the exact quote. Dave got it.
It's about 35,000.
Yeah. So it's quite expensive, and it was a real shock. When we got the quote, we had no idea it was going to be that much. We're still in the process of kind of getting more specifics for the park board, so we can come back with a bit more detail, but we did want to let you know of what we're working on. But it's something that the Lions does charge the vendors for these extra power services. And so it's very frustrating for the vendors when they have to come to us frequently throughout the day to ask to have the power turned back on because we're popping breakers. Last year it got a little bit more interesting because one of the bouncy houses during the really significant power outage I was talking about trapped several children inside the bouncy house. And so I was not there to witness that, but some of the other Lions had to help lift the kids out of there, and it was quite traumatic, as you can imagine, for the kids. So, you know, that's an extreme case, but again, it is something that, you know, frequently last year I was being interrupted, you know, at least every couple hours to go find the breaker that's been tripped and pop it, and, you know. We did get input from Bob Doucette, who's the owner of Doucette's, who comes up every year. They're a great business out of Duluth, and they do a great job putting everything up. That's all a family-run business. And he advised too that we should increase the service. He didn't give any specifics on it, but he felt that given the amount of vendor booths that are food trucks that we had and electric service that we were drawing, that we should update it. Also, one of our food truck owners is a certified electrician for the Oasis food truck, the Mexican food. And he actually took time to go through and explain to me, you know, why the service should be updated. And so the opinion pretty strongly among the vendors is the 200 amp service is pretty inadequate for what we're trying to do. Again, a lot of money to consider. You know, certainly if, you know, one of the things that we're evaluating doing is more of a phased approach where we didn't necessarily do the whole thing this year. We still need to do more research on that, to come back with some alternate proposals if that amount is gonna be too much, at this time. So that's all I have for you right now, and Dave, if you got anything?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. So yeah, this is bit last minute, bit of a surprise, but it's a FYI discussion right now. This, we've got the special event applications before us that will obviously be approved, I would hope. But this is a work in progress, and we just wanted to gauge the board's agreeability to spending this kind of money on electrical upgrades. And obviously, we're, working on the best plan for the best price, future-proof plan. That's something that has come up, where if this festival grows, or if other festivals come and want to take advantage of the upgraded power, we would have that in place. So because it's in that, $35,000 ticket range, we don't need a motion, we just need sort of head nods that, proceed.
Dave, can you not just lay cables like they do at fairs and exhibits?
Those cables have to plug into somewhere, and that's what
Right.
we're trying to upgrade.
Is it the somewhere that's missing?
Yeah.
No, I think isn't the when Harbor Park was built, did they pull power from behind the trading post there?
No, it's got its own transformer in the park.
Yeah, that's-
Craig.
yeah.
It's just, there's enough transformer power there, there's just a 200 amp service that isn't.
So is there enough service feeding the transformer to double
Yes,
that
yes.
amperage?
Yes.
Okay, then where's why do we have to trench then? Just to get another bulkhead somewhere else?
Yeah,
Right.
bigger wires to the bigger outlets. So like at the 200 amp service, we've got little, 20 amp breakers and 50 amp breakers.
Right.
And they
Right.
go to the little plugs and the big plugs. And so with a 600 amp service, we'd need bigger wires to supply bigger plugs. The idea of 50 amp plugs for the food trucks is what's causing
Right.
all of this expense and trenching.
So you wanna relocate another box somewhere else
Several, yes.
instead of, it's, okay, several, all right.
Yeah.
I was just trying to figure it out. Maybe it's a discussion that I know that's park maintained or park operated, but is anybody run it by the PUC?
Yeah, for sure, the PUC's on board to help and
Okay.
or
Well, we got a
contribute
meeting
to
tomorrow,
cost
so I can bring
savings.
it up.
Yeah, they've been included, and they would, at this stage, we would maybe engage with like digging the trench, because that's a big
Right.
expense and a big labor.
That's
There's
what
a lot
I'm
of
thinking. I think
Yeah,
you're right. The biggest expense here is trenching and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just thinking if this is something that the city could do with the people that we have,
we're working on it.
it's a discussion to have.
Yep. And it's a disturbance to the
Okay.
park itself with the granite sand and the flower beds. It's like,
Right.
it can't really wait.
Right.
We want to get this done before peak season, and so we're working hard
Maybe
on
we-
it. We just want everyone to be aware
Right.
of it.
Maybe there's a way to do it where it's not so invasive too. So,
Yep.
If I
Okay.
understand, all we're asking to do today is to approve the application for the event.
right.
Is
Yep.
there a motion to that effect?
Sure.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And it's
Okay,
both
is there
of
any
these,
further
or
discussion?
are they the same?
Yeah,
thing?
there's
Little bit.
two, I'll explain I forgot that we are gonna open the fish burger stand the Friday and Saturday before Fisherman's. So it'll just be
We
it'll
have a
just be the
second
fish burger.
application
Right.
of that we'll deal with in a moment.
You
Okay,
could
thank
package
you.
it.
You did, yeah. It's the same thing you did last year, right, Pete?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
One
it's
bit
the
of-
same. Yeah.
One bit of discussion, when you start trenching through that area, is that not a environmentally compromised site of the old gas station?
We're not going that deep.
We're not going that deep.
We're not going that deep.
Because
No.
I know there are monitoring stations around that
Yeah,
site.
we're not messing with those wells.
It wouldn't be
That's,
that deep,
you really don't want to unless you have to.
right?
No, we're
But
not.
there is
It's
fiber
not a factor.
optics and all sorts of underground utilities that would become.
Oh, yeah. We gotta find all that stuff.
I'm going to drag us back to the matter that's before us today, which is a vote on the question of whether or not to approve the special event application of the Fisherman's Picnic. All those, is there any objection? Hearing none, it's approved unanimously. There was a second application with regard to the fish burger stand, and we have to vote on that too. Am I correct, David?
Sure.
I don't have a copy of that one here. Now I do.
It's just a date, yeah.
Wait a minute, this is the typewritten, that's the same as the one we just voted on, right? Or
Nope.
does this include the
No,
fish
it's the
burger
weekend
stand too?
before.
Okay, so
Yep.
the application now includes the fish burger stand issue as well. Do I have that right? Okay?
Move
And
to
is everybody
approve.
agreeable?
Second,
No, I'm gonna do this quicker.
Okay.
Is there any objection to including the fish burger request in our prior decision?
wonderful idea.
No,
I haven't heard any objection, so ordered. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Pete.
Have a great rest of your day.
Pete.
Thanks.
thanks,
Don't,
Thanks,
thanks,
Greg.
Pete.
don't dig up anything you'll need later.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
Paul, I'm glad you're on salary today. Appreciate your being here.
Who does it for the money, you know?
Tell us about the golf course and what you'd like us to know about it today.
Well, like a week ago, we couldn't really get on the course, it's so wet. And now it's kind of the opposite. We're kind of like just full bore trying to get it playable. So we're kind of in the middle of getting things mowed up for the first time and getting the irrigation going. You know, the basic stuff. We're kind of shoring up our employees, and that's kind of, we had our main mowing guy, which is Paul Peterson. He the other day he walked in and told us he wasn't going to be working this year. So we've been kind of moving, talking to people about filling that void. And yeah, so it's just a really busy time. I think, you know, a couple weeks ago or last meeting even, I think we were talking about opening it up about the third week of the month, and now we're pulling it back to the 15th, which is, you know, in about a week. So, yeah, things are moving fast. Clubhouse is looking good. We've got that kind of set up pretty good. Yeah, I just have a million things in my mind right now. Just, you know, little things. We'll be firing up the irrigation tomorrow morning. We had to rebuild a couple of things, and that's just how it is. Same old, you know. So that's kind of where we're at with the course opening.
Is there anything we need to decide today?
Anything to decide today? No, not that.
And we were gonna be doing some marketing to the city people. Has that moved along at all?
Yeah, right now we're just taking a bunch of pictures for posting. The only thing we've got for marketing so far is we had an ad go out announcing, you know, that we're opening, you know, just a general advertisement like that. But what we really want to focus in on is the media. So we're taking a lot of pictures right now and getting stuff ready to post for that. I've got to get in contact yet with Danny Ford to get his leagues thing going, and yeah, that's pretty much what we've got going right now.
I think Boreal.org and WTIP would be happy to put some kind of announcement on
Yeah,
with regard to the city residents. And the same would be true, I would suspect, with the electronic version of the local newspaper.
yeah, and so I think you're right, and we'll get the word that we're going to be opening up a little earlier than we had forecasted before. So yeah, that'd be a good medium for getting that out, you know, quickly.
Any questions or comments from members of the board?
Are we still a wine bar with hot dogs this year?
Yeah, we've got pizza, hot dogs, basically whatever we can make in our little kitchen setup we can do.
It's
Yeah.
wine and beer.
But what, wine and beer, yeah.
Yeah, wine bar with hot dogs, yeah.
Beer. Beer is better with hot dogs.
Really? That really helps, Dave, thank you. All these years.
Paul, there's something I'd like you to think about between now and whenever it makes sense to do something.
Yeah,
Several of us have been walking our dogs on the course pre-opening. When it comes time for players to be out there, we won't be doing that. But I think we don't have any policy with regard to dogs on the course during the playing season that I'm aware of. And it occurs to me we ought to bar people from walking their dogs on the course between 8 and 6, 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. or something like that. When-
well, we've had people, you know, vacationing people and things, they call to see if we're dog friendly, and we kind of do it on a one-by-one basis, it's nothing we're promoting. But in general, I've been, you know, talking to them, and, you know, if they're keeping their dog with them, the dog's not aggressive or anything, you know.
Well, and of course, my dog's been walking along with me up to now, and the question, at least one person I was talking to thought that dogs and people didn't belong together on the course, and I'm not convinced of either position, so give it whatever thought you want to.
Yeah, I mean, if it got to be a large population of dogs, constant dogs, I think, you know, we'd probably need to think differently, but right now it's very intermittent.
Okay.
And so
So what'd you do with my dog?
I pet him, and then he seemed to
He's got me
wander.
here somewhere, there he is, okay.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
He went golfing.
Is that all you need to tell us today?
Yeah, that's,
Anybody else have comments or questions about golf? Okay, city council report, Craig,
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
thank you.
Yeah, we had a city council. I gotta grab that. Anyway, we had a city council meeting. There wasn't a whole lot on the agenda because the mayor was out of town and Mike Roth was at a meeting, so, Tracy couldn't make the meeting and Mike Roth was out of town, so we had a very light, meeting, and the only thing that there was on it was, approve an application for North Point to set up for, set a tent up for,
Prom.
was it prom? Yeah. They block off the street and set up a tent in front of North Point. That was the only application. That was the only thing we actually had at the meeting. That was the only thing on the agenda, other than approve payment of bills and those types of things. Well, we had another thing, and I think we got it in here, is that Pride March. We already approved that at the city council meeting, so I see it's in our packet here, but we already approved that, through the city council. The Pride March, by the First Congregational Church had filled out an application for that. So that's all we had in our city council, meeting last week.
Any questions or comments about the city report? All right, let's move on to the parks report.
Thanks, Steve. I'll be brief. We've opened the campground last Thursday, May 1st. We made our mark of getting the water in the bathhouses going on time and welcomed a few guests, but last week was really wet and cold, so it wasn't that busy. But we're very busy behind the scenes. You know, we have 7 water zones, 4 bathhouses, a rec hall. Right now, we just have bathhouse number 1, which is the one over by the marina on the east side. And then number 4, which is the one out west, just under the ball field open. More than adequate. Bathhouse number 2 and 3, kind of in the middle of the park. We're deep cleaning right now. We'll have them open by the weekend of the 16th is our goal. And, you know, pretty light for occupancy over the next few weeks. Memorial Day weekend's the big one. The Grand and Nord bike race is back in town. So we're sold out for that weekend, as we should be. Lots of mountain gravel bikers coming in. All our tent sites are taken, which is great. I've always been a champion of that race because I was here before that race, and Memorial was a softer weekend. It was 60 to 75% full, so it's been a big difference having 600 bikers come to town for a race, so hopefully we'll be ready.
So you're saying that we're full on Memorial Day as opposed to 60% or 70% last year?
Yeah, unless it's like 40 degrees and raining, which it can be. So it's a wild month. May is wild. But we've got great staff back. We've been reporting this in the last few meetings. Our returning seasonals are back. We've got our custodians in, the downtown gardeners back cleaning out flower boxes. Aaron's been busy chipping the trees on the boulevards. You might have noticed on the Highway 61, we're taking care of those boulevard trees. And so busy time of year, all day today in the marina setting docks. And really, we've got, a couple more weeks to get everything done we need to get done. So on the side, then I've been meeting with Mike Fisher, as I reported last month. He came up at the late April, I believe. We had a quick tour of the grounds, walked to the rec hall, the bathhouse 4, that's just south of the rec hall, took a look inside both of those buildings, got a feel for things, looked at the parking lot as well. Mike's a very good architect, and so he wanted a really firm understanding of the
Bathhouse
project.
3 was the one near the rec hall.
It is.
Okay.
So that was an in-person meeting. Then just last week, Mike and I met on the screen and really kind of reviewed the project, reviewed the expectations, the timeline, the deliverables. The format is what we're working on right now. Like, what kind of materials do we need to make a successful application to the state? The application window is open through July. We both agree that's pretty ambitious, but might just happen depending on what kind of materials we need to present or apply. Part of this,
Sounds like we need to have that on the agenda for what, June?
that's
No matter
right. So
what.
part of this process is LHB is gonna come back, Mike's gonna come back with his lead designer. We're gonna have like a open house in the rec hall where the staff are gonna be able to engage with these folks and kind of tell them what we would like or what we need. Really, functionally with bathhouses and cleaning and that sort of business we'll take care of from the staff's perspective. We'll also invite the community in to talk about their needs, stakeholders, including the DNR, with this idea of a trailhead parking lot, right? We want to hear from our friends down at Two Harbors DNR. They'll be up for this, but that's just what we're targeting is perhaps the June park board meeting Tuesday. We could have LHB in the house. They could come to our meeting, take input from you all, get a really strong understanding of our wants and our needs. But the timeline is tight. I'm not promising that this application will be in by July. In fact, if we do a good and thorough job, it most likely will not. We don't want to rush this. It's $1 million, or I've been, I think, calling a 7-figure project, so it's gonna take time.
And you've, seen the process, the application process? Have you?
Not so much.
Oh.
That's what I need to work on to let Mike know, like, what kind of documents are
Yeah.
needed to make a successful application. They, unfortunately, or fortunately, but they're not familiar with this or haven't done this.
LHB?
Right.
There's no real rush to get it done this year.
No, and it wouldn't be done this year.
Right.
It'd be submitted for funding this year.
For next year,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, so there is we don't wanna wait, cause Bathhouse 3 is very old and tired, and the sooner we can rebuild that, the better for the campers.
It does look pretty on the outside.
Well, we thank you, we do our best. And so because of that, it isn't like needing to be replaced this year or next year, but it'd be best in the next few years.
Okay.
So we're working this hard.
Dave, do you need DNR bonding for their part of that project?
No, and the DNR wouldn't necessarily have dollars to put towards it. In my initial conversations with the DNR, like the or the Beaver Bay Trailhead wasn't funded by the DNR.
That's DOT,
Yeah,
yeah,
and it was designed by LHB.
yeah.
So there's that where they've done trailheads in the past, LHB has. But when I first reached out to DNR Two Harbors, they said, yes, we administratively support this, but we don't have a program to fund it.
Cause I've followed bonding this year, last year and this year very closely. Don't wait up.
Right,
There's no bonding coming for stuff like that.
we're not
So
intending to.
don't put any weight on it.
No, and the parking lot's I don't wanna say easy part of this, but would be the least expensive compared to the facility. But we want the DNR as a partner,
Yep.
because part of the application is this idea of inclusivity and community partnering and providing for the greater, regional community.
Yeah.
So this is all in the works. I meet with the DNR actually online on the Monday, the 12th. We'll have a little,
Who do you meet with?
Kevin
Kevin?
Johnson.
Yeah. Cause he knows trail stuff really well.
What else? So we got big news in the marina. Just wanted to make you aware of this. Again, it's sort of a bigger capital expense, $25,000 for a new fuel pump. It can't wait. It was a 6-week lead time on the parts, so I made the order 3 weeks ago.
Do you want us to bless it, or are you just gonna go ahead and do it?
I'll take a blessing.
Okay? Does anybody object to replacing the fuel pump at the marina?
I used to work in a gas station.
What does that mean?
Means I know how to run those things.
So you approve of the
It's a
change?
wonderful idea.
Craig's got experience here too.
Hearing no objection,
Yeah.
Right?
hearing no objection, you have our backing and blessing.
Thank you.
When the pump doesn't run, nothing happens.
That's right.
Yeah, wow.
So hopefully we'll get that installed in early June. And then, another little expense I'm looking at is a new utility card or so, or two, I don't know. We have 2 old blue Yamahas right now. You maybe see us bombing around on them. They're great. They're Yamahas, so they'll probably run forever. We keep them maintained. We'll continue to use them. Last year, they started to fail intermittently, and we really missed them when they were out of service. So I'm looking at a replacement in that $6,000 to $8,000 range, and that's really nothing I need blessing for, but just so you're aware of. And then the last point you wanted to hear about, Steve, was the Great Lakes Cities Initiative project that we're working on over in Boulder Park. We had an online meeting, a kickoff meeting with so the mayor has been really spearheading this, leading the charge. She applied for the grant money to fund this project. We got $120,000 to work with this group, the Great Lakes Cities Initiative. They have contracted Stantec, which is an engineering firm that they're familiar with working with. They're working numerous projects throughout the Great Lakes. So we're just a part of this. But we're, Grand Marais, and everyone loves Grand Marais. And so actually the Stantec engineer has been here, and he knows us, and he knows this parking lot, and he knows Boulder Park, and he's great to have on board because of that, local knowledge. But we really needed, part of this meeting was to say, yes, we have bigger needs down here at Boulder Park and the Coast Guard parking lot and the Coast Guard station, right? Like we've been saying this for a while now. The fate of the Coast Guard station is a priority project for the city council this cycle. And so they're gonna do environmental assessments on that this summer. They're looking into the deed work. That's gonna be determined in the next year or two, what happens to the Coast Guard station. Once that's in place, we'll no doubt engage with a master plan process for the point. That includes Boulder Park, that includes the old boat launch parking lot, that really isn't a boat launch parking lot anymore because of the new one. We can do whatever we want with this land. It's kind of a blank slate. Boulder Park's the same way. Great big open space. The message to the Stantec people then was to focus on the shoreline erosion. Do the data, do the science for how big are the waves, what kind of impacts are they making along this old sheet piling, and what type of green solutions can you recommend to, mitigate this shoreline erosion. And so, because it's only a small amount of money, $120,000, we're not gonna apply it to a master planning the point. We're gonna focus it on Boulder Park and that corner where the sheet piling and the boulder rocks are, and do wave analysis, and do stormwater analysis, and do the science of what does this corner need to be environmentally healthy. And really take it from there. So it's a smaller project in a bigger project that it's gonna have to play out. I was a strong advocate at this for boater access. That sheet piling itself is a kind of a day use wall. It's a transient wall during the summer. The entire sheet piling is in a sad state. When you look at it up close, it's old, it's failing, not just in that Boulder Park corner, but all the way down to the boat launch. And we know that's where the transient boaters are. It's kind of the only place we can send them in the summer. We have a small marina, not enough dock space for especially the bigger boats, the 40, 50 footers. So I said, well, let's just make sure whatever we do, we don't forget about the boaters and the boater access here. And that's part of this equation. The grant itself really funds green solutions, so it wouldn't fund a new steel wall with concrete. It funds like rock, like beach, rock, nourishment, cobblestone beach, you know, kind of a green buffers, vegetative buffers, stuff that might not work. When I brought up the fact that I've seen the big waves over there and like how long would a little bit of, you know, buffer work, it's like, that's what we need to find out.
We'll look forward to more reports as they come in.
Thank you.
I propose to skip the discussion of rules of the board rules and responsibilities for the moment and go on to the Cook County Pride March application. Get that done while we still have a quorum. Is
Good
there
call.
anybody, is there anything new about this from prior years?
No, and all I can say is, back to Craig's point of like, the city council approved, I believe it was streets and sidewalk use, and so that's been approved, cause they're gonna march, but the setup in Boulder Park, or sorry, Harbor Park is what this application is for. It's the same as last year. They'll have a stage, they'll have, just as you see, like, no additional needs for us, so there's no reason not to approve this.
Okay, does anybody have any objection to the application of the First Congregational Church and the Cook County Pride March Committee to have their event? Hearing no objection, it's approved. Now, do we have anybody here really, it's a bit late. I'm thinking maybe we should put off the discussion of board rules and responsibilities to another meeting.
Or we can simply say, we don't have a lot of concern, I mean, I don't wanna speak for you, but Tracy's introduction last meeting was designed for feedback and brainstorming, and think about it for a month and come back this night and tell us if you have any other questions or concerns. So that's all this is on for, is like a follow-up to the request from the mayor for input, questions, anything that came up in the last month. And if nothing, that's fine if nothing did come up.
Is there a one-page summary of her presentation? Seems to me it was a bunch of pages.
Well, the public art policy was.
Yeah,
I think we'd do better with one
the
page,
application,
one-page discuss policy.
For the public art?
For anything, gets beyond a page, it seems like it gets in the weeds.
Well, that was all-
He's used
that
to
was
being
all
an
about-
executive, I can tell.
Well-
All those pages had to do with the art stuff. And
The word précis
Right.
is magical.
the
Short bullet pointed on the page,
Yeah.
passed.
I think what Tracy wants us to more talk about is just in general about the organization of the park board, and if we feel like our responsibilities are, you know, like accurate to what we signed up for, that kind of thing. Like,
Yes.
that chart that you sent out, that was good. I like that, the reminder of what our,
Sort of the founding document.
well, and,
We should look at that document as a group and see if there's anything we wanna talk about.
oh yeah, it is old.
So let's do that
I mean,
next
there was something on there
Like
that
the
I was
swimming
like,
pool.
well, the pool's on there, but there was another one, there was another that I was like, what is that? Yeah, but, maybe just update that about what our, focuses are. I mean, I know
So-
we've got the big book with all of that in there, but,
So in anticipation of the next meeting, you'll send us out whatever description exists now, or give us a web link to, if it's on the city, website, so we can look at it before the meeting and think about it. Thank you. Is there any other business to conduct before we adjourn? There being nobody suggesting there's business, I think we have the consent to adjourn.
okay,
Thank you all. Enjoy your stay
Yep,
in
thank
Grand
you.
Rapids.
Thanks, Craig.
yeah.
Yep, thank you.